In 2021, Nigerians found themselves facing a rather odd fact. The country's 2021 budget had 128 billion naira for Nigerian legislators, that is, members of the country's House of Representatives or Senate. And that also had 46 billion naira to the healthcare service sector, which was meant to serve over 200 million people. And now the country's Revenue, Mobilisation, Allocation, and Fiscal Commission is performing a review of the pay of public office holders once again. When the process began, there were fears that the agency would unilaterally increase pay to state employees at a time when Nigeria's revenues are weak as a result of the drop in the country's oil production over the last couple of years. The commission has since denied this, drawing the public's attention to the fact that they could go either way, up or down. And now Muktar Mohammed, CEO of Asheer Dynamic Solutions, joins me now from Lagos to give us insights into the public pay review process. Muktar, it's going to be a very interesting one. Good morning to you. But let's talk about it. And let's start off with this. Is there a constitutional or sort of legal requirement as to when salaries of public office holders are reviewed? Or is it just as the commission feels and sometimes when they're under pressure as well?
I think, thank you. Good morning to you again. I think it has to do with when they think, and sometimes it has to come from agitation from either the legislators or the public. We've seen that happen. If you follow the trend recently, one of the legislators was saying that they need to review their salaries and allowance because a lot of people that are depending on them and the times are hard. So in a developed economy, in an economy that is run based on economic variables, once things get this high, there's always a review in terms of minimum wage of their workers. And ordinarily, according to the minimum wage bill, the minimum wage revenue, every five years, I think there are supposed to be a review of the salaries of both civil servants. I know, but I don't know about political appointees.
And it's interesting when you say civil servants, because many of us don't typically see our National Assembly members as civil servants, but that really is what they are. They're paid from the public purse of whatever Nigeria generates as well as the state. So in regards to that, what goes into this review? What's the process? What's the sort of equation or the calculation that typically comes into review like this? We know how companies do it. They'll look at the cost of living. They'll look at the inflation numbers. They'll look at the CPI. But for the public entity, the government as it is it the same process? Is it the same equation? What are they looking at to make their decision?
Fortunately, it's supposed to be the same processes, but unfortunately, it's not like that. I think it has to be, it's always based on emotion and sentiment. Like the legislators will always have more allowances than other people. That's what we have always seen thus far. It's not about what are you bringing into the table or what is our income or our revenue, because if you just look at our budget, you know what we're talking about. We see recurrent expenditure keep getting higher by the day, yet capital projects suffer. So it's not something that the government has really sat down to look at. Oh, these are the heuristic or these are the parameters that we need to use for incrementing allowances or salaries. But definitely the major thing to do is what you just said. Sometimes you look at cost of living, you look at consumer price index, CPI, then you look at the inflationary numbers, and then you use that to actually raise the wages of your maybe your civil servant, like you have made us to know today that the politicians are no civil servant, but I think they are public servants. Even if they are supposed to be there for the people, and the people should come first before them. But what we've seen in our political class is that they come first before the people. So definitely that's why sometimes when they're reviewing their salaries, a lot of people tend to complain. But there's nothing bad in reviewing it. Definitely it's supposed to be reviewed every 5 years, according to the national minimum wage bill. Thereby it's supposed to be reviewed every 5 years. But I think it's just because of the mindset and the perception of Nigeria when it comes to the legislations.
Yes.
And they just think, oh, they will pay these people too much. And again, coupled with the fact that they have not come out publicly up to this moment, they tell us how much they earn in terms of salary and how much they earn in allowances. I think that has been just why Nigerians are always complaining. The trust is not there.
And yes, and there's always that conversation around base salary allowances like newspaper, wardrobe, sometimes even furniture allowances. And the cost is just the difference between what they get and what someone who's earning minimum wage gets. It's absolutely astronomical. So let's talk about the minimum wage. So it was in 2019 that President Muhammadu Buhari signed a new minimum wage bill into law, and it moved the lowest paid government worker from 18,000 to 30,000 naira. But even then, many people said it was simply not enough. It was not a wage that was really reflective of being able to take anybody home or being a real cost of living wage. And since then, there have been complaints. But now when we've seen the skyrocketing cost of living basically in the past 1 year, we've seen transportation go up as well. We know right now the queues are returning to Lagos and other cities. We have petroleum people saying that the landing cost simply is not something they can continue with. So there's an expectation that transportation might go up. Food costs are likely also to go up, as we're seeing because of the floods. When we put all of that into context, taking away the National Assembly from this conversation, if we're to also review the salaries of civil servants right now, what should we really be looking for? What would be a review that would make sense?
For me, that makes sense is also looking at the economics indices, because you cannot run away from that. You need to look at the inflation figure. Like you said, cost of transportation has gone up. Are we going to increase that transportation allowance? Cost of goods and services have gone up. Inflation has gone up. Those are the yardstick that the standard of living actually has gone up, but the minimum wage of the average Nigerian worker is still where it is. So definitely that is what they should be looking at. They should be looking at inflation, especially. Then when you take inflation, then you begin to look at all those variables that are tied to inflations. Like that is cost of transportation, cost of household item, cost of food items. So all this will come in place, and then you tend to increase their minimum wage to meet up with that, with inflation. And so if we are looking at that now, inflation is doing about 22%. So we should be saying that minimum wage should be about 25%. But definitely what we see in Nigeria is your negotiation power. Nigerian Labour Congress, there's no yardstick there's no parameter or yardstick. When cost of living just goes up, they start complaining, and then the government said, okay, we'll talk about it. Recently, the Minister for Labour and Productivity said that there will be a review of the minimum wage of Nigerian workers. And even a state like Lagos went as far as announcing a new minimum wage for their civil servants. But again, it's better, and these things are handled statewide, because the minimum wage bill does not say there must be uniform minimum wage for every Nigerian worker. It build the federal and the state. That has been the challenge. You will keep the minimum cap. The minimum cap is what the president will say, which he have said is 30,000. You are not supposed to go below that, or you can go above that. So, but the challenge has been the state are saying, look, you, the federal government, you cannot negotiate wages for us because you don't know the income that we get. So we need to negotiate with our workers separately. And that has been the challenges that have been going on. And that's why some state government up to this moment have not been able to completely pay the national minimum wage. They are still owing workers' salary because they felt that they could not meet up with the minimum wage tag set up by the government by the revenue that comes to them.
So I'm going to ask you for a prediction before we finish, but then let's also look at the fact that around the continent, there's been conversation and concern about the cost of government. And one of the big things that goes into the cost of government is this recurrent expenditure in the form of salaries, in the form of allowances, particularly to people like the National Assembly. We've seen that in order to keep government spending down, Ghana is actually cutting the salary of government appointees, that's appointees, by 30%. Do you think we should also be seeing a situation where the Commission is looking at cutting maybe those at the higher band, you're laughing, in being able to give an increase to those at the lower band, or even just cutting them so that we can decrease the cost of governance?
Tolu, you know why I'm laughing, because you and I know that will not happen in this party. I just told you that the legislators have been the one agitating for increment in the allowances. They are not ready to come down to the allowances. If you look at the budget, their budget every year gets up. It's higher than the previous year. There's never been a time that their budget has come down. As of recently, even workers in the National Assembly were complaining that their salaries have not even been paid. Up to this moment, we've not heard anything about it. So definitely, cost of governance has gone up. Recurrent expenditure keep going up by the days. And like I always say, this recurrent expenditure that again is not because it's not for the civil servants. It's the government appointee, the political appointees that actually make the recurrent recurrent expenditure, whereby you have the president that have two senior special advisor, you have the special advisor that has special advisor. Even the state are not left out. You have a governor who say he had about 100 advisors. Wilson Wike was saying officer that is going to increase the number of advisors to about 150. So definitely, when you look at all this, you realize that they use that as a tool for re-election. Because what we have seen in politicians is that when it comes time to election, you begin to see a lot of permutation, a lot of people begin to come into government at that time. Instead of at that time, we should bring down cost of governance. So in Nigeria, it's not an economic decision to increase minimum wage. It's always a political decision on when it comes to minimum wage or increasement in allowances.
So I want to share a fact with our viewers today. So with a minimum wage being at 30,000 naira, with the base salary that we hear that senators get, it would take a minimum wage earner in Nigeria 82 years to earn what a Nigerian senator earns in 1 month. So many people think this is also a moral conversation for not just the commission, but even for the National Assembly. But before I let you go, Muktar, let's look at where Nigeria is right now. Is this the time for us to be seeing this review? And when we look at it, we tend to focus on the National Assembly, as I said, but this review would also be for federal public civil servants across the country as well. So right now, we know in the first quarter of the year, earnings from oil dropped to 790 billion naira from 1.1 trillion the previous quarter. Nigeria is also planning to borrow 11 billion naira to finance the 2023 budget deficits. We know that earlier in the year as well, oil revenue, or rather revenue, could not keep up with the pace of our debt servicing costs. This is the end of 2022. We have an election coming up. You've said that these kind of decisions typically are not economic, but political conversations and decisions. What do you think about it in the context of Nigeria's current economic situation?
Well, you need to just look at the decision taken by Lagos state government. It's a political decision, it's not an economic decision. They want to increase wages because it's time for election. So like I said, that's what is the timing, the right time. Definitely this is the right time because a lot of people are suffering. Other developed economy in the world, even developing economy, have increased the wages of their civil servants or even the public or even the private sector. So there is, even in the United States, that is an economy that we copy. The wages of their workers have also gone up. So definitely it is the right time, but whether we have the resources to implement that, that's a different topic entirely. Because when you look at resources, scarce resources, and you see the resources are scarce, and you hear that government is still doing what those in government are still doing what they are doing. They are not bringing down costs. It's only when it comes to salary, when it comes to wages, they begin to tell us about, oh, we have to tighten our belt, we are not any revenue. But the governor still has his 5 cars that are going with him all the way the entrance. The governor still goes for his holiday. The governor still fly private jet from their state to go to Federal Executive Council meeting or National State Council meeting in Abuja or Nigerian Government Forum meeting in Abuja. So definitely and these are all being prepared by civil servants. They see everything. So if you look at it morally, you would have seen that if we are doing things right, you would have been able to tell people, look, we are not earning money so much. We need to, in short, in a good economy at this time, when you're suffering from things like this, then you have to sit down and then you have to do what we call right sizing. You need to reduce the strength of your workforce so that you begin to make a headway. And like in governance, you think, okay, reduce the strength of your workforce so that at this moment, then you start having money for recurrent expenditure. For capital expenditure instead of recurrent expenditure. But unfortunately, like I said, it's a political decision. But what is the right time? I think it's the right time, whether political or economy, there's no better time to increase the wages of the Nigerian worker than now, by the current economic reality. 30,000 naira. At the time, the minimum wage was 30,000 naira. Tolulope, the exchange rate from the naira to the dollar at that time was 360. And that was both in the CBN exchange rate through the banks and the parallel market. As it stands now, the CBN exchange rate itself has gone to 425 naira for a dollar, and then the parallel market, you and I know it has gone to 815 naira. Yeah. Even if you say that is not the true value, it's supposed to be, but that is what it is today. So when you look at that and knowing that our economy is driven by exchange rate, because most of the goods or services that we have comes from outside the shore of this country, then you have no reason than to increase the allowances of of the workers. I expect the president to sign up a new minimum wage before he leaves office. Remember, the minimum wage is not just for the public servants alone.
Yes.
It's not just for the civil servants alone. It also drives for the private sector. What it means that you must not pay anybody that is working less than 30,000 naira. And I think the government should go ahead and do that, and then we can begin to monitor also as well the private sector, because some of them don't abide to these rules. So for me, there's no better time than now. Looking at the economic reality, political reality, I think is the best time to do that for Nigerian workers and the public and the private sector inclusive.
All right, Muktar Mohammed, thank you so much as always for joining me. We'll follow this up because there has been some pushback already and the commission is seemingly on a defensive stance right now. So we'll see how things play out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tolu. You have a pleasant week.
Same to you. And the conversation is one that will continue. Wages of the parliamentarians, National Assembly members, senators, House of Rep members, as whatever you want to call them across the continent, are always cause for controversy and concern. And whenever a review is mentioned, citizens have a lot to say. And we'll see what Nigerians are saying, and of course, what happens as the commission goes through this process in the coming weeks. You're watching Business Edge. Up next, we have international business news, and then we'll be talking the crypto market. Stick around.